Quilted clothing has been around for centuries as a way to keep people warm and protected. But I think that we can all agree that quilt coats are having a bit of a moment, as quilters are finding new and different ways to apply their skills to coat making. Today's guest, Taiga Bentley, has a wonderful story of how she has dived deep into the world of quilt coats. She makes kits, she runs classes, and she sells finished coats, all with her amazing color wash technique. So grab your sewing and a cup of tea, and here's my interview with Taiga Bentley. So welcome, Taiga, to the show. Whereabouts in the world are you coming to us from?
I'm in Toronto, Canada.
Oh, so you're in the same city. Are you originally from Toronto?
I am born and raised. Yeah.
And how did you come to quilting?
I've always been interested in working with my hands. I was raised in an art gallery. Actually, where I'm speaking to you now is the gallery that I now own, but it was started by my grandmother in 1973. So I was raised in this building, and I was raised among artists, and that was kind of the voice in my head. And I always had a creative interest, but no actual artistic talent. I can't paint, I can't draw, I can't sculpt, but I always loved to do things and make things. And I would dive into these obsessions. Pom-poms lasted a number of years. I don't know what you do with thousands of pom-poms. I turned them into planters and hats and all kinds of crazy stuff. Party hats were another one. That lasted a while. I would decorate all of them, and suddenly I had 50, 60 just sitting in my house, and didn't have anything to do with those either. There was a dollhouse that I found that my grandmother had made me. I was in the basement here at the gallery, and I dragged it back up and ripped it all apart and redid it, and that lasted a while. And then my husband and I found out we were going to have our firstborn. And a girlfriend of mine, who is also very crafty, had made a quilt with a beautiful rainbow gradient binding. And I love gradients. I've always loved gradients. They do something really good to the chemistry in my brain whenever I see them. I thought, oh, I bet I could do that. I have like my curse is the I could do that. And I immediately went on eBay and bought a sewing machine, which I hadn't owned, since high school, and bought a bunch of charm packs, which I think is truly the most expensive way to collect fabric of all time. And I had found Lo and Behold Stitchery, Brittany of Lo and Behold. She had done at the time that really beautiful ombre puff quilt tutorial with a video and, explained every step. And I looked at it and my brain sort of went like, that's just straight lines. I can take these squares and I can make straight lines. And I made this one, my first gradient rainbow quilt for my future daughter, and thought like, one's enough. A little did I know that's not how it works with quilting. That's simply not the way that it goes. When I finished it, I brought it into the gallery to show it to my grandmother, and she loved it, which is shocking because she only likes black and white. She dresses exclusively in black. She has purple hair. She smokes cigarettes. She drinks coffee. She swears. She drinks. I mean, it's like she's the perfect woman. And so I show her this bright, puffy rainbow thing, and she goes, "That's great. I want one too." And so suddenly it was back to the sewing machine to make another gradient quilt, this time in black and white. And it spiraled from there. It always spirals with quilting, doesn't it? You get hooked on something and then, you can't stop. And the great thing about this, which was so different from any of my previous crafty obsessions, is that you can share them. They're useful and desirable. And so suddenly it was a nephew's birthday, and I could make him one. And then at the same time, a family friend saw me working on it, and they had a new baby in their family, and that was my first commission. So it went from something sort of small and immediate and urgent, and I just had this feeling of greed around creating this object. And then suddenly it was my whole life.
You mentioned your grandmother with the art gallery, but were your parents crafty?
My father's an aeronautical engineer. So he's crafty in the way that he can take some string and, sticks and make a working car. My mother worked in the gallery when I was growing up and then went on to teach. I think that they're creative in their ways, but not necessarily. I wasn't raised by artists. They can't sew a button. Yeah.
So were there textiles in your house that you played with?
Yes, for sure. I think that my grandmother, my parents split when I was very young, and my mom was very young when she had me, and she was working here at the time. And so being in the gallery was really the place that I came as a child. If I was sick and had to leave school, if I was on my weekends, this would be where I would be. And so there was always something, you know, there was always canvas or bits of wood or strange rocks or things that you could build. And my grandmother denied me nothing. I was her for a long time. I have a sister who's 11 years younger than I am. So for the majority of my childhood, I was her only grandchild and I was here constantly. And if I showed interest in anything, she would, bring me the best of what that could be. There was a day that I was interested in calligraphy, and suddenly I had all kinds of glass nibs and inks and any number of things. And when I had a sewing machine in high school, it wasn't just like cottons. She brought me swaths of silk and satin and Chinese textiles and twirls. And, I had no idea what to do with these things, but there was nothing so precious that I wasn't encouraged to experiment and make and build and grow. And so I think that in that regard, I have a level of comfort with materiality. I'm not afraid of it the way that I think a lot of people are intimidated when they walk into a contemporary gallery. They're not sure where to begin. And, they don't want to use the fine china. And I'm kind of the opposite of that. I really do. I dig into all of the best stuff and just, lay it all out there.
What a wonderful story to have.
Yeah,
We're going to digress just a bit here, but tell me
sure.
about your grandmother. How did she get into the art gallery business?
Oh my goodness. Well, okay, so her name is Olga Korper. I encourage everyone to look up the Olga Korper Gallery. She's actually received the Order of Canada for her contribution to the arts over the course of 50 years in her career. She was a single mother in the 60s. She went back to art college against her husband's wishes and worked in marketing and advertising for a while, and then taught art in a high school for a while, and was, a little younger than I am now. I think she was in her early 30s, and she was feeling kind of lost. And she tells this story all the time, so I'm not revealing too much because it's one of her favorites. But she called an old lover in despair one day and said, I don't know what to do with my life. I don't want to teach. This is so boring. I want something else. And I think he was probably smoking. They're probably both smoking on the phone at the time. And he goes, well, decide what you want to do and call me back. And he hangs up on her. She gives it a think and she calls him back and says, I think I want to be an art dealer. I think I want to have a gallery. And he goes, okay, well, decide how much it's going to cost and call me back. And he hangs up on her again. And so she calls him maybe 20 minutes later, a little bit of math, and goes, this is 1973. She goes, I think for $5,000, I could start a gallery. And he goes, deal. And he wrote her a check. And she started in the basement in Mirvish Village, which for anyone in Toronto would know. Mirvish Village was, it was a very interesting neighborhood with up and coming stores, and it became a theater district, and it's, very, very intriguing. And she was a woman alone in the early 70s in the basement of a building, starting to run a contemporary art gallery. And then it grew from there. It was suddenly the main floor in a slightly larger space. And then she rented a much bigger space in like a 4-story brick building where she brought in other dealers to create a kind of community. And that became a very well-known art spot in the city. And then in the late 80s, she found the building that we're in now on Morrow Avenue in Toronto, which is where, if anyone has seen the reels from my quilt retreats in Toronto, that is where they're held. It's this huge industrial space. It's an absolute knockout. It's one of the best galleries in the country for space in its originality and its light and love of art. And we've been here for 36 years. Yeah, she just didn't stop.
Wow. What a legacy.
She's a force, for sure.
You got on my radar because of your amazing quilt coats. How did quilting move into quilt coats?
I am a person naturally driven by greed. I'll just be honest. I am. In art collecting, in artists that we represent, in food that I eat, in places I travel, and in shopping, I am a super greedy person. And so my grandmother tells me and has told me my whole life. And one day, I've been making quilts, I've been making quilt commissions for kids, and then it's starting to move into adults and, queens and king sizes that I'm shipping all around. And one day I'm following accounts on Instagram and I find this woman who turns quilts into coats, and my heart stopped. The lust was unparalleled. I thought, like, I could wear this in the world. I can take these and I can wear them outside on the planet and not just have it on my couch. What a dream. And she was doing this thing where, you could send her your own pieces, found or otherwise, and she would take the quilt and turn it into a coat and mail it back to you. And I went, great, because my experience in garment making was zero. And my faith in cutting up something I made myself was also zero. And I sent it to her. And I really, like, it was the first time I had to think about making a quilt that would transform into a garment. So how the pattern needed to lay differently and what lengths it would be and where collars would be and how sleeves would be cut. And, it really changed the way that you think about the material, especially if you want the gradient to flow from top to bottom and not just be a random cut. And when it came back, this is shady. I don't mean it that way. It's lovely and I wear it. But in turning it inside out to inspect what was done, I was really disappointed. And I realized not only is this super simple, but I bet I could do it better. And so began the hunt to find a pattern that I liked. And I took all of my scraps that I had, and I figured this is a great use of scrap because we, quilters don't like to waste, which is something I really like about the community, I think. It's a lovely added bonus. And I started building a coat, a white, gray, black gradient patchwork coat that I just, really took the time. I didn't have any commissions at the time, and I thought it through, and I love polka dots, and, I was going to do a polka dot lining, and it was really hard. It changed the way that I had to think, and there was so much more math, which is very daunting for me. And then one day I wore my black and white patchwork polka dot quilt coat into the gallery. And that was a big mistake because my grandmother, who was also my boss at the time, is a black and white polka dot lover, the likes of which the world has never seen. And she snatched it off my body without a moment's hesitation. And I got a great photo of her in the gallery playing with my toddler at the time. And the lady never took it off. That was it. But not only that, she's a special kind of person. And I cannot stress enough how she has dictated the kind of human being I became, because she makes me take myself very seriously. Not that it's not fun, but she took the coat, she kept the coat, and she wrote me a check. And it was without hesitation. She paid for it the way that she would pay for a painting, the way that she would pay for a handbag. She saw value in it, and her willingness to follow through on a transaction, especially being who she is, being truly like the grande dame, the queen of the Canadian art world, that changes something in your mind. You go, no, this is serious. This is worth something. It's not just a gift. It's not cute. It's not shit. It's real. Once it was real, I couldn't turn away from it. I had to then make myself another one, but suddenly other people saw it and they wanted one too. And, thank goodness for Instagram as being this amazing sort of global connector, but people all over the world were able to see what I was making and reach out, and to customize it for each of them it's the greatest joy. It's so wonderful. And also surprising, people from Japan messaging me for a custom coat. What a mind-boggling experience. And, something it became my great love, I think. Not that I wasn't enjoying making quilts for kids and for homes, but to have people put faith in me to customize something that they want to wear on their body out in the world, that it'll look good, that it will showcase a bit of who they are. At that point, it stops being about me. These are the colors that they chose with the icons and fabrics and patterns that they wanted that speak to them. And, it's just a little piece of their personality that they're brave enough and joyful enough to wear in the world. No bigger compliment than that.
So you've got multi layers of this quilt coat. You've got the quilt coat for yourself, and you make it in multiple different sizes and shapes and everything, and it's posted on your website. But you also sell kits and you
Yes.
also teach classes. Do you teach classes
Yeah.
both online and in person?
I have yet to teach an online class. I'm really hoping that I can get my business together and record each step of making a coat so that, people who don't live here and who can't come in here can have access and do it at home.
But
Um,
the happiness, the smiles on the people that have taken your class with you is phenomenal. Like you've really put them through a transformational experience.
it's very heartwarming. It's very heartwarming. I mean, it may come as a surprise, but I am a major introvert. I'm very shy. And my first time ever doing any kind of quilt retreat at all was teaching one to 26 women. I had no idea what I was getting into. It was 3 days. I was working from 6 in the morning until 11 at night. I ate one meal a day. I basically didn't stop. I was high on adrenaline, had the time of my life. And by the time everyone left on the third day and said goodbye, I burst into inconsolable tears and had to sit down and sob because I didn't realize, I had spent so many years speaking into the void of Instagram reels where you put it out there and there's comments, but it's not quite the same. And suddenly over 3 days, I had friends and it was a completely new experience. You really build these unbelievable camp-like relationships. Yeah, I got totally hooked on that. But I work these people really hard. They're very talented. They come from all over. This summer I had women coming in from Utah, from California, from Qatar, you know, big, big travels. And they're there to learn. And I really do my best to push them as hard as they can go. And the things that they create are beautiful, beautiful, as good or better than what I could make myself. I'm very proud.
Yeah, that's a funny thing about being a teacher. Like you're supposed to be the expert in the room, but the students always bring something more
For
and
sure.
they they take your idea and they turn it into something more. You think beforehand that would be upsetting, but it's not. It's actually quite thrilling.
No, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. And I remember my favorite teacher in well, I guess it was junior high, my English teacher, and he said, his greatest achievement is students who are smarter than he is. No true teacher, no real teacher wants to be the smartest one in the room. You only want to amplify. And watching what they do is great, and the ideas they come up with and the things they teach me. And then, again, it's that same community and relationship that you see happening in the room. Day one, they're very shy. By day three, they're wandering over to each other for tips and tricks. It's a beautiful thing.
What is the order of how these things happened? You made your first quilt coat. Did you start selling next, or did you start showing people how to make them?
It's a call and response is the name of the game for me. So whenever someone requests something, or if enough people request something enough, how can I deny? The fun is in the sharing. I have a massive collection of fabric because I'm a total shopaholic. And, if there's a slight shade of orange that I'm missing in my gradient, I know I need to go and find it or I'm going to be driven insane. And the thing is that most of the people who follow me and most of the people in my community are quilters themselves. They don't want me to make them a thing. They want to be able to make their own thing. And I have access to this and can share it with them. And then they can work through the process. And, there's so much thought and consideration that goes into gradients and color theory. And, you need to use your eyes. And it's an exhausting process if you take the time to do it. And to be able to give them that, and it's like handing them a puzzle and saying, here you go. Like, I'm here to help, but I believe in you. You can do it. And so I had quilters from around the world, which, like, what's cooler than that? Send me different messages saying, I really want to try my hand. Could I buy a pack from you? Would you give me how many do I need for a queen size quilt? How many do I need for a king size quilt? And I I would pull these rainbow stacks for them or in whatever color they wanted and ship them off. And then I would get these little videos that, with their things up on the wall going like, is this right? And do you move anything? And it's so great to see it spread. I don't own rainbows. I don't own gradients. I have no copyright over that. I have a way of thinking that makes me very happy and I feel compelled to do it. But whenever anyone else wants to try their hand, I'm overjoyed to provide. And so, with the kits for the coats, I think it really started with the first retreat because we had women coming who some wanted to use their own fabrics and go through their stash and build something out. But many wanted access to my library. And, they were able to say like, hey, I really want this, or can you put together a that? And then I would be able to, give them a little stack and watch what they create. And it's beautiful. It brings me so much joy. And then I think by extension, they also feel so much pride in being able to do this thing that on your phone seems difficult, but in life is very fun.
So you're selling these stacks of fabric. Do you have a storeroom where you're keeping bundles, or are you pulling from your own stash?
I've always pulled from my own stash. For each person that wants, I will go through and I will think do you love dogs or cats? Do you like mountains or water? Like, do you want more sophisticated geometrics and florals, or do you really want like the fun Heather Ross, Tula Pink, weird little creatures doing stuff? So much of the joy for me is in reflecting the person that it's going to. Sure, I'll put together like a 100-piece rainbow pack because anyone can play with rainbows. But if it's something that's meant to be worn, I think, I really want to reflect each individual person. That's what makes it special.
So have you been able to get to the commercial side of buying fabric?
No.
Yeah.
Nope. No. Fabric guys, any brands out there, if you really want to help a mother out, that would be great. No, I went from buying charm packs to buying fat quarters, thinking, wow, fat quarters are so much less expensive than charm packs. And I get 12 squares a quarter. Gosh. Well, that was dumb. Then I worked my way up to half yards, thinking that I had, fooled the system. Now I'm buying yards, which is still not great. But the truth is that I'm buying, over the course of a year, I'll buy 1,000 yards of fabric, and I really need them to be in a wide range of shades and tones, and otherwise what I do doesn't work.
Well, reading your bio about putting crayons
Oh,
in
yeah.
color order, I thought I was the only person that did that compulsively.
We all find each other in the end.
Yeah. But you probably have found the same challenge I have with quilting, is that not all colors are represented equally
You are correct.
in quilting. So what are the challenging colors that you find?
I mine diamonds for periwinkle. I find that to actually be the hardest one to find. I'm always looking for, I would say tertiaries. I think that you can rely on brands. You can always find red, yellow, blue. You can always find the Christmas colors. You can always find the neutrals, always, always. But it's the subtle shifts in between where you've got, not even, it's so hard because like I can say that Ruby Star side, you can always rely on Ruby Star to put out like a hot pink and a turquoise and a peach and that sort of ochre color that they love. And they're constantly churning out new, awesome, fun, weird patterns in a very reliable set of colors, which is smart because anyone who buys Ruby Star is probably a Ruby Star loyalist. And they're going to keep getting them, and they're always going to match with the things that they have already. But finding anything in periwinkle is extremely rare. Finding certain shades of cold pink are rare. Finding yellows that aren't like kind of eye-twitchingly bright or like baby berry are rare. And finding red that is not Christmas themed is rare.
I find a dark red, like a
That's a
true
tough one.
dark red and a
Yeah.
true dark green, really difficult to
Real,
find.
real tough. Rifle Paper Company makes a really beautiful dark red and dark green, but you got to catch them on like a non-Christmas day. Otherwise, they're just I think that it's a funny thing to say. Same with orange and Halloween or dark purple. Same thing. Really hard to find dark purples. I think that, fabric brands give you colors that you're going to need during holiday time, but they forget that like these are colors that we all love and want to use the rest of the time as well. And because I make gradient work, I try to avoid any holidays at all because I don't want to date when this thing is being worn. Like a witch is cute, but a witch and a pumpkin is too much.
I'm a Halloween baby.
Oh, great.
And I don't like black. I find black just sucks the life out of me. So I'm always substituting like an espresso for black
Ooh.
because it
Oh,
goes
that's
with
nice.
some of the warmer colors that
And
I like to
very
play with.
flattering.
But I'm the same with you. I prefer tertiary colors. I like colors that change in the light. Like, oh, I
Yes,
thought this was yellow, but it's
exactly.
really much more orange. Or I thought this was a red,
The
but it's much
best.
more fuchsia now.
Yeah,
Those are the ones that excite me.
I'm with you 100%. 100%. Yeah.
So you are the mother of how many young children?
Two feral daughters.
Two feral daughters.
I thought I was having humans. It turned out I had squirrels. Too late to put them back. Nothing I can do.
So how are you finding balancing motherhood with this new side hustle? Plus, it sounds like you still work in the gallery.
I
So
do. Yeah. I have no idea. I have no idea what I'm doing. I have no clue. I try my very best to feed and water them and occasionally bathe them. And I read them books because I like books and I want them to like books too. But generally, I have no clue. There was no handbook. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. They're 2 and 4.5. They're just getting to the point where they like to play together and are really talking to each other and inventing stuff and being absolutely nuts all the time. They're really cute when they sleep. So cute. Those children unconscious are like the cutest kids I could possibly imagine. They're really well behaved for basically everyone except for me, which I'm told is a thing. Yeah, I love it. I mean, I like to say that I would kill for them and I would die for them. And beyond that, I have no clue what I'm doing. But they seem happy.
So did you find that you've got to put a timetable in place to manage your business as well
Oh.
as, or it's just every day is come what
Well,
may?
okay, so here it is. The kids will wake me up at 6. We have during the school year from 6 to 7:45 to get everyone dressed, fed, brushed, and out the door. I will then work in the studio from 8 to 10. I will come to the gallery. I live only a 10-minute walk away. So I'll come to the gallery from 10 to 5. I will go home and again with the feeding, brushing, and washing and reading of my children until around 8, when, if I'm lucky, they will be beautifully, sweetly asleep. And then I'll go back to the studio in my backyard from 8 until midnight. And that's the day. That's the day every day over and over again. On Mondays, the gallery schedule is different. The galleries are open typically Tuesday to Saturday. So my husband and I, he's also an art dealer. We have our weekends Sunday, Monday. Sunday's family day. Monday, I'm back in the studio all day long. I don't stop.
Are you saying no to a lot of different things then? Because it sounds like your day is just totally packed.
I say no to dinners with friends. I say no to casually lying down, eating a burger and watching TV. I would love to say yes to that. I mostly say no to myself, if I'm being honest. I think that in many ways, finding quilting, especially finding quilting early in parenthood, has been a really great mental health space for me. It's quiet and it's meditative and it's creative and it for a long time, especially when they were really, really little and you're really just kind of an extension of their bodies. Uh, it was a place that I still felt completely human. Like I could once again feel my edges as a person and be totally solitary and independent. And so for that, I mean, it really sustained me through that period of time and let me use my brain, which I needed badly. And yeah, and it was a nice counterpoint to the art gallery, which is really predominantly, it's business. I think that there's the crossover is in curation. We mount shows here once a month and change them. And so when work comes in, deciding where it goes and what it lives next to and what it loves and how people look at it and create connections visually and emotionally, that's my practice. That's 15 years here in the gallery now. And fabric is very much the same thing, I find. You tell little stories. Yeah.
I just realized that your oldest is probably a COVID baby.
She was. Yeah. I mean, not on purpose. My husband and I think, had the final pre-COVID wedding. We got married February 2020. And we found out we were pregnant a month later. And so I was in New York for work. It was a big art fair, and I was there traveling with friends. And it was just the point where people were still touching elbows as though that was going to spare us. No one really had any idea what was going on. And I spent the entire weekend drinking scotch and eating oysters and having a grand old time. And the day I flew home, the subways closed in Manhattan. And I took a test the next day and we found out we were pregnant. And then the whole world shut down, which was awesome. I know it's a very fraught thing. And I know a lot of people had a really hard time, and I don't want to minimize that in any way. But my husband and I went to my parents' cottage, which was empty because they were in California. And I was so sick through my pregnancy. And I got to just lie down. And this is before quilting, this is before anything. I spent 3 months working on a 5,000 piece gradient puzzle. That's it. It was just one of my quilts, just one massive gradient. And I ate plain crackers and I worked on that puzzle and didn't need to worry about or think about anything else. It was a joy. So lovely.
So half of the viewers are going to be green with envy.
I know. I'm to everyone. I'm so sorry.
And I'm in that group. And then other people are going, "You're nuts. You're crazy."
I know. It was a very personal experience, and I think back on it very fondly. And then, of course, the good thing about a COVID baby is that my husband was home. He got to have a very prolonged paternity leave. And we went down, we actually flew down to California during COVID, where my parents live in Palm Springs, with the new baby, thinking, we have a couple months while the world, in fact, then it was always a couple months, in a couple months, it'll open up again, right? In a couple months, by spring, it's going to be over, right? And we flew down to be with them for, 6 weeks to get a little bit of help and be in the sun instead of like locked inside in Toronto in winter in COVID. And that's when they instigated the COVID hotel when you traveled. And my husband went, "No effing way am I bringing a baby to a COVID hotel to get COVID." So we ended up staying in Palm Springs for 5 months. I bought a new sewing machine down there. I started ordering fabric there. Like I didn't stop. And that really was the start. My puff quilt was back home. I was down here with this little Singer sewing machine, ordering all of this fabric in the US, which is a way better place to order fabric than here. No offense, Canada, but you got to step up your game. And I made my first I Spy rainbow quilt for the baby. Matilda is her name. And what was shocking, now I'm a sucker. I'm just going to put that out there. As a mom, I'm one of those like, whatever you want, baby. Oh, that's what you're happy that way? Great. This baby did not want to be put down, and she definitely did not want tummy time. And my mom was there going, you gotta lay her on her. So she has no neck strength. Look at this enormously fat baby. She's a cabbage. She's good for nothing. This is crazy. You gotta put her down. But she hated it because tummy time for babies is like being stuck on a treadmill. It's the worst effing thing in the world. And one day I put her down on this I Spy rainbow quilt that I had made with little squares, fussy cut. And she was mesmerized. It was unbelievable. Like she went from a squirming, grouchy, crying mess to just silently observing all of these shapes. Her eyes are developing. She's starting to see color. She's there for 10 minutes. She gets a little fussy. You move her to the blue section. It was massive. And so the next 4 months of our time there were spent just orbiting this little quilt on the ground, having a hot coffee for the first time in like 6 months, and seeing her engage completely in this thing. And I went like, oh, this is so much more than just a blanket. Like this is an educational tool. And so that was when, other people, family, friends were coming by and they were looking at this quiet, happy baby on this quilt and going like, I got a baby. I know a baby. Can you do one of these for me? And friends of friends would see ones and they would say like, oh, my sister's having a baby. My nephew just had twins. Can I order a blanket? And like, it really took off. It was one of those validating moments where I thought like, this is something beautiful and useful that can, if it's made well enough, really last and be handed down in a family and, make the rounds. And like, what's better than a cotton thing? It gets thrown up on, it becomes, a park blanket. You throw it in the wash, like no big deal. There's again, it's like, it's taking high quality materials, putting them, with care and intention into a beautiful object that then gets really used. And I love that. I love that. I would have been devastated if the things that I was making were put into a pine box somewhere and left to rot. The love is in the use for
Too
sure.
good to use. Too good to use. I always love that. But I'm a big advocate for the tummy time quilts as well. I usually try to find an ABC motif
Cool.
because I found the very same way. What somebody gave me a quilt, and I spent so much time with my children talking about what was on the quilt. I just think it's a wonderful time. Wonderful time. One, I don't have to carry them down. But two, it just felt like their brains were exploding as you talked about the
Oh,
colors and
so
everything.
true.
Yeah.
So true. And it's amazing. It's still a huge part of our day to day now, even though the girls are 2 and 4.5, because now it becomes games and storytelling. Find the rabbit and where's the like you can have it in the car across their laps and really like use it to play and encourage them to tell stories with it. And they have, familiar friends in the space. And I think all of that's very beautiful.
So have you reached out and found some local quilters?
I'm getting to know more. I had a couple Toronto quilters in my retreats this summer, which was nice. Surprisingly few. Many of them come from away. And I'm doing a guild talk in November for a guild in like the Barrie Simcoe Quilt Guild is having me do a guest lecture, which is very fun.
Do you put a label on your quilts?
I do. Yeah,
Excellent.
here, I can show you. It was cold enough today to actually wear one in. It's my little quilt wizard.
Oh, wow. I love that.
Thank you. It's the design, the wizard, the little creature was made for me by a local artist here in Toronto, Vavra Nedelska. She's a beautiful illustrator, very sort of medieval inspired, Ukrainian inspired and strange. And I love her work. I've liked her work for a long time, and I really liked the idea of supporting an artist in creating something original. So we went over it for a while, but the little person, it's neither male nor female. This my wizard, my little magical creature, who is holding a lit candle and walking with this big quilt draped over their head as though through the passages of a castle. And I liked the idea that it was this person is at anyone, it's everyone, it's all of us. It's that essence within us that wants to seek and find or illuminate the path. And at the time when she did this for me, most of my work was I Spy related. Not that it isn't still, but it's kind of transformed into being I Spy for adults. And so it was all kind of wrapped up in this story, this narrative of seeking.
I saw the inside of your quilt there. It's just as beautiful as the outside.
Oh, I think it's a Dear Stella floral that they did last year, and I couldn't get enough. Actually, this was one of the coats that I made to sell, and I shouldn't have done it because periwinkle to chartreuse with a polka dot binding and floral interior was never going to escape my clutches. So it lives with me now.
You have a she shack in your backyard.
I do.
How did that come to be?
I do. I'm a pretty urgent person. I don't have a lot of patience. And I had this dream that my daughters would share a bedroom and that I would take our guest room and use it as my creative space. And that dream was dashed almost immediately when it turned out that both of my daughters are horrible, horrible sleepers. And I realized that this was not going to work and I needed to create that second bedroom for our younger daughter, Tabitha. And what was I going to do? And really, was it like post up at the dining table in our open concept Victorian row house to, throw thread all over the place? Like, it was making my husband crazy. I'm dropping pins. Like, it's a friggin' nightmare. And I looked outside at my tiny, tiny little yard that grows nothing and thought, ooh, what if? And a little bit of research brought me to this company, Summerwood, which I can't recommend enough. Again, Canadian made, Canadian lumber, Canadian family, but they weirdly do most of their work for California. I guess that's where all of the casitas are. But I loved that it was fully customizable to the square foot. They have all the different looks you could imagine for a little outdoor studio, very modern or Victorian, or these sort of gazebo style. And I really wanted a witch's cottage. That was my vision. I wanted you to look outside of this thing and think, there's probably a cauldron in there somewhere. And once you start building with them, there's a great, like a digital portion of their site where they'll render it for you in real time. So you can flip back and forth between types of windows and doors and ceiling heights. And I built the thing up and I thought like, oh, this could be really, this could be it. This could be really good. This is a place just for me, a little magical witch's cottage for me to go and work and get all of my nonsense out of the house and clear the space for my kids. And like, this is the answer. How do I pay for it? Like we're a young family in the arts. My husband and I work very hard, but that kind of free flow is not in the cards these days. And my grandmother said, that sounds like a great idea. Let me get my checkbook.
Nice.
It was one of those things where she once again just took my dreams from my mind and put them on a plate in front of me. I was able to pay her back in time. It wasn't a gift, but it was an absolutely, it was a loan that made the dream possible. And, as soon as I started doubting myself and thinking, like, this is silly and I can't continue this forever and it's just a hobby, and how am I gonna, like, how is this really important? I'm not important and what I'm doing doesn't matter and I could just get rid of all of this and, be a better mom to my children. And she stepped up the same way that, her ex-boyfriend stepped up when she wanted to start the gallery. She gave me what I needed and, really validated what I'm doing as something real and serious, that I can take myself seriously and that it's okay. It's fun and it's playful and it's whimsical and it's weird. And I still need to buy a cauldron, but it's nevertheless something that brings me unbelievable joy, and having that space for myself to really grow has made all the difference.
You mentioned with the quilt coat that was made for you that you were disappointed on the inside. Was that because of the lining? Was it because of the sewing? Was it because of the finishing?
It was a finishing. It was a finishing thing. Basically, the pieces had been cut out and it had been serged together. It taught me a lot, but like I sent a bound quilt. And so if you imagine, the sleeves were laid where the cuff landed on the binding of the quilt. Or the only way to sew that together is to serge across, but suddenly you have this big bulky serge line tied up in the binding like a knot. And it gets loose, and the pockets were put on, and they, I'm a bit of a bully to the things that I own. I use them and abuse them, and I put my hand in my pocket one day and ripped the thing off. And I thought, like, this isn't it. I think that quality, if you're going to have something that you love that's going to last, quality needs to be paramount to the object. And so, but it let me think through how to finish these coats so that they look beautiful and will sustain over time and use. No more ripped off pockets.
So are your jackets reversible?
They're not. I haven't figured out how to do that yet. I think it's something that I do need to learn, and I want to learn, mostly because I want to teach it, which I think is kind of a cool thing that's happening now. I want to expand my skill set so that I can help others create the thing that they want. Like, I personally don't need a reversible jacket. I would rather have 17 jackets, but if someone came to me and they said they'd like to do it, then I at least want to be able to share with them how they can make that possible.
So take a look at my video called Quilt As You Go. It might say Quilt As You Go Part 1. So that's a technique on how you put pieces together with 1 inch. It doesn't have to be on the bias, but 1 inch tape. So you basically fold both sides in 1/4 of an inch, and then the two pieces butt up against each other.
Fantastic. That's very helpful. And I do love bias tape.
And there is a thread from Wonderfill. It melts with heat. So if you need something to stay in place, you sew a seam and then you staple it down, then you get to pull off the thread from one side. But now you've got a nice clean edge that won't move.
So, that's so cool.
Do I mention it in that one? No, there's another video that I've done called Magic Threads. And it's in there. So 2 videos that I think will probably help you get to where you want to go for a reversible.
Well, a shout out to Wonderfill. I mean, not only is that one of the coolest things I've ever heard, but they have been so good about supporting my work.
Oh, they're lovely.
They're such an amazing company, Canadian company. Can't plug that enough. But I love their range of colors, and I've been using them for years and years now. And they're really on board. They really support their, national artists and crafters. And I'm a huge fan. They've been so nice to work with.
Family business, lovely, lovely family. No, I really have enjoyed them. I've had Stephanie on the podcast.
Have you?
Yeah.
Love. We love you, Wonderfill.
So if people want to get a hold of you, find out about your classes or your quilt coats, how do they get a hold of you?
You can reach me on Instagram. We're, in private message. You can find me on my website. You can always connect to me through there. Go straight to my email. If you sign up for the newsletter, which I often forget that I have, I will put out when new courses are coming up, when new retreats are booked, scheduled in order for you to participate. But I'm always accessible online in the social sphere in some way. I check my phone constantly, and you can message me with questions or comments or pack requests or, class requests. I'm here for it.
And your handle is?
House of Taiga.
Well, thank you very much for being on the show today. It's been lovely getting to know you and finding about your process.
It's my absolute pleasure, Karen. Thank you so much for having me.
I hope you've enjoyed my interview with Taiga Bentley. I'm certainly motivated to grab my quilt coat out of my UFO pile and get it into my wardrobe. If you are interested in contacting Taiga for a class, lecture, kit, or coat, I will leave links to her social media and her website in the video notes below. Next time you're in your sewing room, be sure to have Karen's Quilt Circle playing in the background. I have interviewed so many amazing, interesting people on this show. Let one inspire you. Take care and I'll see you next time.